Sorry.
Roger, by the way, and his 81-year-old British pals in the Netherlands. He's speaking from his own echo chamber. One of the most distressing things about Brexit is the way in which we've been splintered. We've been balkanised. If you actually look at the recent
elections in the Netherlands, they have increasingly been electing people who are anti-EU.
Yes.
It is not just Roger and his...
No, it's not.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Julian Discourse. It's been a decade since the British public shocked the establishment by voting for Brexit, and the elite media class still hasn't recovered. Instead of acknowledging why working class voters wanted to take back control of their country, they just double down on the exact same exhausting snobbery. In this clip, watch Brexiteer Annunziata Rees-Mogg face off against a progressive panelist who is literally melting down over leaving the EU. When a fed-up caller delivers a massive reality check, the establishment's only response is to immediately insult his age and intelligence. Hit subscribe and let's watch this elite hysteria completely collapse in real time.
It's the 10th anniversary of the Brexit vote, and we're asking if it was a mistake. 0207 862 2222. This was the moment. Oh, I should say, we're going to see a moment in the studio. I was standing 20 feet from the great Dimbleby, the god Dimbleby, because I was doing the graphics. So this happened right beside me. Have a look.
Well, at 20 minutes to 5, we can now say the decision taken in 1975 by this country to join the common market has been reversed, and that's the result of this referendum, which has been preceded by weeks and months of argument and dispute and all the rest of it. The British people have spoken, and the answer is we're out.
There we are. I remember thinking, oh, I need to remember this moment. It was a decision sold on the promise of taking back control, with Nigel Farage having this to say after the result came in.
It's a victory for ordinary people, decent people. It's a victory against the big merchant banks, against the big businesses, and against big politics. And I'm proud of everybody that had the courage, in the face of all the threats, everything they were told, they had the guts to stand up and do the right thing.
60% of Leave voters aged 65 plus are quite old, pensioners, the majority, and will be older now. 6%, this is contested, but the Bank of England says we've lost 6% of our GDP, our economic scale. Nearly 1 million was the net migration peak after Brexit, the year-end March 2023. A lot of that legal migration. 23% of Leave voters think Brexit was wrong, according to YouGov. Annunziata, is it you wake up sometimes, you think, I can't tell Jeremy this, but I think it was a terrible mistake?
Not once. And in fact, for every opinion poll that shows that, there is another one. There's another one by the same polling company, YouGov, that shows Lib Dems don't even support their own party's policy of rejoining the customs market and the single market and the customs union. But the Observer hired Opinium, a very respected polling company, and over the last year, they have done it every 3 months, and it has consistently shown that when given the options, 33% want to rejoin and 55% want to remain out.
That's every time sort of neither here nor there. This is really about...
These are polls that show opposite things, but it's given as though it's fact that everyone wants to rejoin. There's no evidence.
Well, I don't know.
But particularly
it doesn't really matter, does it? We're talking here about whether it's a mistake.
Because we've actually got some freedoms that are very valuable. We can see when it's our politicians failing. They can't say it's the EU's fault anymore, and I think that is very valuable. But we've made trade deals with much faster growing countries and economies than the EU, which is very sluggish. We've outperformed Germany with double the growth rate since we left the EU.
Tessa, you got your head.
We've got AI.
Tessa had her head in her hands for a moment there.
Yeah, for me, it will always stand out as the most traumatic month of my life for various personal reasons. But actually sitting on that sofa, and I can't believe that you were as phlegmatic, Jeremy, as standing behind Dimbleby on the night that Brexit was announced, and you just like, oh, I must register this as a special.
I wasn't standing behind him for a start.
Well, wherever you were, I was in a deep form of trauma. And I think those of us who understood the magnitude of what was going to come down the track realised that this was something that couldn't be undone in our lifetime. So to suggest that the barometer for the success of Brexit is whether people want to go through the equivalent again to rejoin is absolutely disingenuous.
You were on marches, weren't you? I think we got some
I protested
Tessa
for months.
on marches.
Yeah, and I can tell you, and I don't put it entirely down to this, that I had a really unpleasant late miscarriage a month after Brexit. And I'm sure it's because I really was in such a state of shock and trauma. I didn't sleep, to be honest. I was sort of demented with the way in which our country had been set down this path of tribalism. Do you know that statistically, prior to David Cameron's Bloomberg speech, which first mooted the idea of leaving the EU, before then, only 2% of the population placed it as one of their national priorities to leave the EU. And look how since then we've been placed into this binary nightmare. It's a nightmare. Look how we're pitted against each other. I hate it.
I'm very sorry.
I'm sorrier.
A horrific and very traumatic time. But you can't blame everything.
I didn't say I was, but I'm just saying that added to this fog of war, the Brexit war.
Okay, let Annunziata speak.
I find it very sad for you that you find anything politically quite so unnerving that it puts you on edge in that way. This is politics. This is how we're governed. This is who runs us. And we need to be run by politicians we can get rid of. It was about taking back control. And that is what we have been able to do. Have we made the most of it? By no means. Control over our trade policy, control over...
I was always amazed at the way all those countries gave up those fabulous currencies. I couldn't believe how they did it. I mean,
unbelievable.
Why would Italy give up the lira? Why would Germany give up the great Deutschmark? Why?
Because countries don't have to be exceptional and different to feel a sense of pride and to own their own identity.
You've got to be able to print your own money.
No, Jeremy, it's really weird how you can be impartial about most things and suddenly you care about the pounds and pence in your pocket. I've actually got to fundamentally disagree. I don't think it was necessarily a bad decision for Britain as an economy of reasonable heft to stay out of the euro. But for the Netherlands, it was a no-brainer. But let's actually hold on to that idea of British exceptionalism. It's got us into so much trouble. And I put it down...
What you say to Roger just says the whole thing is corrupt.
Yeah,
Sorry,
Roger, by the way, and his 81-year-old British pals in the Netherlands, he's speaking from his own echo chamber. One of the most distressing things about Brexit is the way in which we've been splintered, we've been balkanised. If you actually look at the recent
elections in the Netherlands, they have increasingly been electing people who are anti-EU.
Yes.
It is not just Roger and his little friends aged 81, which is one of the reasons people dislike the Remain campaign. That not only did it treat everyone who voted Leave as though they were as thick as mints and about to drop off their perch, both of which you've just implied about Roger. I disagree. I think he sounded perfectly coherent.
I don't know. He just told us his age.
Yeah, I think what Tessa and the other sort of deranged anti-democratic little Europeans are failing to acknowledge is that the EU is a declining part of the world, economically and demographically. It's part of the past. The vast majority of our exports for decades have been going to non-EU countries. Only actually a relatively small amount of what is produced in Britain is exported at all, and what we export to the EU only accounts for about 8% of our GDP, significant but declining. But the main point I want to make is that if we were to go back into the EU, we would have to sign up for the euro. That is now a condition of membership.
Which is why we shouldn't have left.
Anti-democrats like Tessa and Michelle, who just called in, may have no problem with handing over our economic destiny to unelected bankers in the European Central Bank, fixing our interest rate, fixing our exchange rate.
The governor of the Bank of England isn't elected.
Never sell that to the British people, and that is why even Mr. Flip-Flop Burnham is not going to try to take us back in.
But Mark,
thank you, Mark. Thank you.
Once again, I need to respond to that because I've been accused of being deranged and anti-democratic. I find it absolutely extraordinary that you can take this, the sum of the total being just the economics. It's something much broader. It's about our cultural capital abroad. It's where Britain was placed. Suddenly, we shot out there on our own, on a whim.
And we've got a better trade deal with America than the EU does because of it.
In terms of our international clout on the world stage, it's plummeted. You look at the...
What you just witnessed on that panel is exactly why the political establishment completely lost the trust of the working class a decade ago. It has been exactly 10 years since the historic Brexit referendum on June 23, 2016, and the elite media class is still completely trapped in their own echo chamber. Notice how the progressive panelist didn't argue facts, she argued feelings. She literally described the democratic vote of 17.4 million people as a personal trauma. But as Annunziata Rees-Mogg and that brilliant caller accurately pointed out, feelings do not govern a sovereign nation. Democratic accountability does. Let's inject some actual reality into this debate. When David Cameron gave his famous Bloomberg speech back in January 2013, promising a referendum, the establishment assumed it would just be a rubber stamp for Brussels. They were entirely wrong. And despite a solid decade of Project Fear predicting total economic collapse, the sky did not fall. In fact, since officially leaving the EU in January 2020, the UK has repeatedly outperformed Germany's sluggish economic growth, and the European Union's overall share of global GDP has continued its steady, undeniable decline. But here is the ultimate truth, that anti-democratic rejoiners desperately want to hide from the public today in 2026. They know that if the UK were to re-enter the European Union now, it would not be on the special, privileged terms they previously enjoyed. Under current EU rules, the UK would be legally mandated to adopt the euro. That means permanently surrendering the pound sterling and handing complete control of British interest rates and monetary policy over to unelected bankers at the European Central Bank in Frankfurt. The Remain establishment isn't actually mourning the loss of trade. They are mourning the loss of their own unearned authority. They would happily trade British economic independence just to feel validated by the global elite. But the British people took back control, and no amount of television hysteria is going to reverse that. Thank you for watching Julian Discourse. If you refuse to let the establishment rewrite history, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and I'll see you in the next one.